Hi everybody, my name is Miss Darya and I've been an art teacher at the Gold Coast Art Center for almost 6 years. I am thrilled to be showing you some winter themed art projects for this Vacation Arts. Since we can't all be together, we can still have fun and make some really cool art when we're apart. So today I'm going to be showing you two projects, and they're going to be using very similar materials, and they're both all about snowflakes. Now, the first project is going to be a little bit easier for the little ones to do all on their own. The second project, if you do have young kids at home, they might need a little bit of help from the adults. For the first project, you're going to need a watercolor piece of paper, a watercolor brush, water, a paper towel, a set of watercolor paints, or if you have only separate colors, we're going to be using our cool colors, which are purple, blue, and green, because they're a little bit more wintry and remind us of snow. And you're also going to need a white crayon and some regular salt, the kind you cook with. If you have big crystal salt, like kosher salt, that's going to be great for this project. So what this is called a watercolor resist painting. Now, as some of you know, when something resists something, it means it doesn't want to go there. So that's the cool thing about our white crayon, because this picture is actually going to be a little bit magical. You're going to start by drawing an invisible picture. And like I said, I'm going to be showing you how to draw snowflakes. But once you try that out, you can really do this project with any winter theme. You can make snowmen or houses or trees. It's really just about the technique, and then let your imagination go wild. So I'm going to show you a couple of simple ways to make snowflakes. You can start by making a line, making another line, one more, and one more. So this is kind of our snowflake skeleton, but now we're going to get creative. We can add little lines to the tops of our snowflakes. You can add a circle or even lines connecting together to make the body of the snowflake. You can add little lines on our snowflake skeleton just to liven it up a little bit. The possibilities are endless. I'll give you another example. This time, the snowflake is only going to have 6 points to it. And once again, we can do little circles on the ends, maybe a bit of a web-like middle, maybe another circle. Again, this is where you can get really creative because no two snowflakes are alike. Once you've practiced on a piece of paper and you feel confident about your snowflake drawing abilities, then you can move on to your actual watercolor paper. You can make as many snowflakes or as few snowflakes as you'd like. You can make them big, small. I wouldn't go too small because it's really hard to get really tiny details with a white crayon, especially if you can't see what you're doing. Make a swirly snowflake over here. That'll look really cool once I add my paint. Once you're done drawing your invisible snowflakes, it's time for the paints. This is where your drawing will be revealed. Now, if you've never worked with watercolor paints before, or even if you have and you might need a reminder, I'm going to give you a couple of very basic rules. Rule number 1, watercolor paint is very thirsty. It needs lots of water. That means you have to put water on your brush. You have to put water in the paint. If you don't use water, it doesn't work and your brush gets angry by sticking its bristles out like that, and the paint won't go on the paper, and it's just not fun for anyone. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna dip our brush into our water cup. Now, if you want to mix colors before you put them on your paper, it's best if you have some sort of container, like a little palette, or even little disposable cups, whatever you can use around the house, so that you're not mixing the colors in the palette or in the watercolor set. We don't want to do that because then that mixes our colors and gets them dirty, and then next time we don't have clean colors to use. So I'm going to start with some blue because it's the wintriest of colors, and every time I dip my brush into the paint, I make sure I have plenty of water on it. Now, because I'm not gonna mix this blue, I'm gonna go directly to my paper with it. And all I'm gonna do is cover my paper. So I'm gonna start at the top and I'm gonna paint. Now, if I wanna switch colors, I'm gonna wash my brush really well until it's nice and clean. You can even dab it on your napkin. If there's no paint on the napkin, you're good to go. If there's still a little color, wash some more. So, and then I'm gonna switch to my purple, and I'm gonna mix my colors directly on my paper because that's fun to do too. Again, make sure you use plenty of water. And you'll notice the more water you use, the more your colors will blend and mix together. So I keep mixing my colors, adding water. I'm gonna do a little bit of a darker blue. Now, if you want your colors to be a little darker, add a little more paint, because the way watercolor gets lighter is with water. So even though it needs water all the time, as you can see, if I use more water, it gets lighter. If I use more paint, oh, look at that, it gets darker. So I'm gonna keep going. Now, as you notice, our snowflakes are starting to appear. And I made a few in some different spots. You can make more, you can make less. I'm gonna add just a little bit of green right here at the bottom. Don't wanna do too much green, but I think just a little bit might look very nice. Once your entire paper is covered, while the paint is still wet, you can use your salt and see what happens. So I'm just gonna sprinkle the salt all over my paper, especially in the areas where the paint is really wet. And what you're gonna see is a really cool reaction between the paint or the water in the paint and the salt that'll make it look, once it's dry, like your picture has ice crystals on it. So once you've sprinkled the salt on all the wet paint, you're just gonna leave the artwork alone and let it dry. Once your picture is dry, you can shake the salt off into the garbage can, being careful not to make a mess, and you will see your finished product with lots and lots of little ice crystals all over where you put your salt. For the second project, we're gonna swap out the white crayon and the salt for some scissors, some glue, and some doilies. Now I have some doilies of different sizes. If you don't have any doilies, you can also use regular paper, but it is a little more difficult because these are already pre-cut into a nice circular shape. For this project, we're gonna start by just painting our entire watercolor paper with our cool winter colors. Now, I have a bigger size watercolor paper here than before so that I can fit more of the snowflakes that we're gonna be cutting out. But if you only have a small paper, that works too. So what I'm gonna do, because this paper is so big, is I'm gonna make sure I'm using lots and lots of water so that my paint doesn't dry out before the colors mix together. So I'm gonna take lots of water, make sure my paint is really nice and wet, and then just start putting it on the paper. If you don't want your edges to dry, just dip your brush in water and go right back to your paper. As long as the edges of your paint where you painted are wet, you'll be able to switch colors by washing your brush and then mixing the colors together. Nice and smooth. So again, I don't want my edge to dry. I add more water. I'm gonna add a little more color because I see how it's getting a little light. I want it darker. So I'm just gonna add a little more paint each time and a little more water. Now this time I'm gonna add a tiny bit of green just to liven things up. I'm gonna put it on top of my blue so that they mix and make this really nice turquoise. Once the entire paper is covered, you can set it aside and wait for it to dry. While that background paper is drying, we can start making our snowflakes. I'm gonna start with my doily, and what I'm gonna do is take it and fold it in half so that the little circle scallops match up, just like this. Then I'm gonna fold it in half again. Now your doily should look like this. For these last two steps, you gotta pay very close attention. You're gonna take one corner and you're gonna fold it about 2/3 of the way so that the scallop matches the one in the middle. Then you're going to flip the doily over and do the same thing on the other side until you end up with a shape like this. Now we can start to cut our snowflake. Now there's lots of different ways to do this. Just like there's many ways to draw a snowflake, there's many ways to cut one out of paper. But a couple things to keep in mind while you're working. If you cut the tip of the snowflake, you're gonna have a hole in the middle. If you don't want a hole, don't cut the tip. If you do, go for it. Now, it's important to cut only the edges. You can cut both edges in little circles or triangles, or you can cut one edge and then you'll have less designs and patterns on your snowflake, but you can't cut all the way through because then your snowflake falls apart. So I'm gonna do maybe 2 little triangle shapes on this side. Then I'm gonna flip it, and it's a pretty small snowflake, so I'm just gonna make one kind of curved shape on the other. We'll see what happens. You never really know till you unfold it. Now at the top, if I keep it as is, the snowflake will still keep the doily shape, that sort of scallop shape. If I cut it, then I get some other possibly cool shapes and designs. Let's find out. So then you're going to carefully unfold your snowflake, and you're going to see what you got. Now, you're going to make enough snowflakes to cover your background paper. So if you have a small paper, you might want 1 or 2. If you have a bigger paper, you can do 3 or 4. Of course, you can always cut as many of these as you want and just hang them up around the house. If you want your snowflake to be colorful, in addition to your background being colorful, then you have to paint the doily first before you cut. That is very important, because if you start painting it after it's already like super fragile and delicate, it's gonna fall apart. So make sure, if you do want to paint your doily with watercolor first, use whatever colors you want, paint it before you cut it out, let it dry completely, and then you can cut your snowflake shapes into it. Once your paper is dry and your snowflakes are all cut out, it's time to start gluing them to your background. Now, it's very important not to put too much glue on your snowflakes. They're delicate, very thin, and it really doesn't take a lot to make them stick to your paper. So what I like to do is just take the glue and put tiny little dots of glue just in spread out areas on your snowflake. Again, you might need a couple in the middle and just a few more around the edges. No need to drown our snowflakes in glue. Once I have a couple of little dots, I can place the snowflake anywhere I want on my background and very gently just press down on the areas that you have the glue. You don't want to move it around or rub it because it will break. And it's finished. Now, you may notice that one of my snowflakes is actually hanging off the edge. If you'd like to do that, 1, it would let you add more snowflakes, and 2, it would be kind of interesting because once it's dry, all you have to do is cut the snowflake edge that's sticking off of your paper. I have 2 here, one side and the other. Nice and careful so I don't cut my background paper. And now you have a much more interesting picture with some of the snowflakes cut off going off of your paper. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoy these 2 projects and that they spark your imagination to create more and more art. Have a wonderful winter. Stay safe, and we hope to see you at Gold Coast Arts Center sometime soon.